right? As the blade Darksider lunges forward to do its thing, Chung-jun was already saying his prayers as he was certain that this was it. He's really done for. Liu Fengyuan and Qingwen watched helplessly as their friend was about to knock on heaven's door. But just as the tip of the blade was about to carve up the nerd's face, it stopped. In fact, the Darksider's entire body has been frozen. It turned its head to the side after sensing the one responsible for stopping the blade. Li Chengyin quietly manipulated the land to grab a hold onto the monster's leg. He also overheard the humans mentioning Lu Luo earlier. Maybe they have some sort of connection to the young lady. There's only one way to find out. He needs to save them. Our boy, Li Chengyin, held the blade Darksider by its feet firmly, giving Nerd Boy the opportunity to get back, away from the lethal edge. His comrades were useless as hell. The blade Darksider tried to turn its ugly spider-looking face around to see just who was holding him in place while muttering gibberish. When the monster fails to see who's holding him back within the limitations of human sight, he rotates his head in a full 180 angle like he was in an exorcism movie. Doing so allowed him to spot the embodiment of the land they were standing on, Li Chengyin. The Darksider immediately shifted focus to attack him, using blades with reckless abandon. He saw the attack coming from a mile away, but he did not bother dodging or doing anything fancy to defend against the tip of the weapon. Li Chengyin chose to get some information by observing the monster's behavior instead. By his educated guess, this thing shouldn't have the capability to communicate, for it's the one standing on his body, but not only does it not apologize, it's even attacking him. With a confident smile, Li Chengyin decided that he should teach this Darksider a little lesson. It is only fair since this is his literal home ground. Using just a single thought, he made the ground that the monster was standing on collapse into itself, creating a decent-sized sinkhole. That's one way that Li Chengyin can control his land body. From the human's perspective, the Darksider just rushed in the opposite direction and attacked the empty air only to get caught by a freak accident. At least they were safe though. Just a second ago, Nerd Boy thought that he was going to die a gruesome death, maimed by Darksider blades, but he was saved by a landslide that came out of nowhere. The pink-haired e-girl, Liu Fengyuan, started sending something odd from afar, so she curiously looked. With lively enthusiasm and excitement, she pointed to the other side of a cliff where smoke was billowing towards the skies. If there's a smoke signal visible from the area they're currently standing on, it should be ignited by survivors from their school. Hell, it might even be Lu Luo herself. So, the trio just found their next stop. Composing themselves, they took another trek towards the smoke. Toot Toot the flower carefully watched them walk off. He turned to the side to see Li Chengyin back from dealing with the monster that threatened the group. He just casually buried the Darksider deep in the ground, never to be seen again. Toot Toot was curious as to why Mr. Landlord was letting Lu Luo get in contact with her own kind, with humans. At the moment, deciding to split nutrients among many people may not be the smartest move. But Li Chengyin was well aware that humans are not solitary creatures. He would know. He was one too just a little bit ago. If there's a choice, humans will wish to form groups and live together. Moreover, it has been some time since the eclipse started and changed the order of things. Isolated in the deep wooded areas, they have no idea what the current state of the outside world is. The information that these people hold regarding what's happening in the grand scheme of things concerns Li Chengyin's group as well. Speaking of groups, Lu Luo has finally reunited with her friends. Toot Toot was just worried at the possibility of these humans trying to fight for their nutrients. If that happens, what do they even do? Not everyone can have a good relationship with each other like Toot Toot and Liu Liu, also known as his tumors. Li Chengyin assured the eccentric flower that there's no need to be afraid, for he won't hesitate when the time comes to take action, no matter who or what the threat might be. E-girl Liu Fengyuan could not take her hands off Lu Luo, hugging her tightly and celebrating the fact that her friend was fine. She was so scared when they lost contact all of a sudden. Lu Luo had to calm the e-girl down, as she's been hugging her for so long and so tightly now. Liu Fengyuan was just glad that Qinwen and Cheng-jun were willing to come with her to this side of the mountains. If she departed alone, she wouldn't have been able to find her green-haired friend. Qinwen snidely commented that Lu Luo just managed to stay alive alone due to some kind of miracle. Cheng-jun was just amazed that she managed to build a decent shelter, as if she was planning to hide in this place for a long time. Mr. Buzzkill. Qinwen asserted that hiding here for a long time just won't do. Just a few minutes ago, they ran into a Darksider and almost got wiped out. He was certain that this land was not safe at all. He wants Lu Luo to follow the group to the civil defense military fortification in the city where there are plenty of resources to go around for every survivor. Without the military fortification protecting the remaining humans, they might as well be free meat to be hunted and killed by the Darksiders. Since they were already on the topic, Lu Luo asked what exactly was happening in the outside world. Hearing that question almost made Qinwen spiral from the sheer horror of it all. There are monsters everywhere. the Darksiders have taken over. More than half of the human population has suddenly mutated into different forms of monsters. They went wild, attacking normal humans. Chaos has prevailed, and order no longer exists. The majority of the people in the safe settlements don't even dare to go outside after seeing the terror of it all. They can only curl up in the civil defense military fortification, praying for the uncertain arrival of the army. Chinwen says that, but he's desperately trying to get Luluo inside that miserable place, going as far as yanking her arm. They only got this far without losing their lives because of Liu Fengyuan's drone capturing the vacuum zones of the Darksiders. No one in their right mind would have come forward to risk their lives on such a dangerous rescue mission. So, he wants to be the knight in shining armor and get her into what he calls safety. Luluo's arm was starting to hurt with just how tight the brute was gripping it, trying to yank her out of her seat. This Chinwen fella just gives off bad vibes overall. So, Li Chengyin decided to interfere, using the walls of the earthen house to push a bowl over the shelf. The clay bowl hit Chinwen on his shoulder, shattering into tiny little pieces. The shock and pain loosened the grip on Luluo's arm. Liu Fengyuan decided to step up to defend her friend. As far as she knows, Chinwen wasn't this violent before. He wasn't the type to hurt others out of impatience or anything like that. That made Mr. Buzzkill's wild temper flare even harder. He asserted that he risked his life to come look for Luluo, and now this e-girl is scolding him like a child. He added that if she continues being so talkative and hesitant, she will eventually die at the hands of Darksiders. Nerdboy Chung Jun tried to mediate, jokingly asking his bro if meeting a Darksider just now irritated him so much. For now, the boys will go outside to calm down while the girls pack up and get ready to leave. Our sweet summer child, Luluo, was starting to blame herself for Mr. Buzzkill's actions, while Liu Fengyuan was glaring daggers on the brute. Outside, Chinwen was still fuming for some reason. In his opinion, the girls are just not seeing how dangerous it has become out here. He's also regretting being so impulsive and tagging along in this suicide mission. Chungjun tried to stay level-headed and ground, urging Chinwen not to be so rash. Luluo had survived all alone, so she might need some time to accept the reality of the situation. Thinking that the big guy was just hungry, he offered some roasted potato prepared by Luluo herself. The trip back home will be even more difficult, so they should at least fill their bellies up with nutrients first. Chinwen took the potato like it was his rightful property. He commented that this is how it should be in the first place, that he should be getting resources first. This brazen act did not escape the land's watchful eyes. Lai Chengyin and Toot Toot quietly watched the dispute from afar. They were still waiting for whatever would happen next. Toot Toot confoundedly asked if this is how humans normally interact with each other. Li Chengyin answered that it wasn't. Human behavior can't be generalized. All Toot Toot knows is that he's seeing an ungrateful and callous thug, a perfect target to steal nutrients from without feeling guilty. Those people are even eating the potato stem pieces that he painstakingly grew right now. Based on the landlord's observation, these people are not potential companions who can stay here and work together. They are friends with Luluo, but they specifically came to bring her away with no room for refusal. Now, if they really want to bring Luluo away and she wants to join them, should Li Chengyin appear and stop them? Does he even have the right to interfere with Luluo's decision? Toot Toot was used to just doing what he wanted to do, so he asked if those questions were even important. Being a former human, it's important for Li Chengyin. More important than Toot Toot's potatoes. Putting aside the topic of potato stem pieces, the snarky flower has discovered something even more important to share. The three humans came from so far away, but they don't have a hint of dark elements on them. If they were exposed to the outdoors for so long, where in the world did the dark elements go? Li Chengyin realized the implication of that statement, and it's a scary one. After the boys finished the potatoes outside, Chungjun asked Mr. Buzzkill if he was in a better mood now that he had eaten something. In the meantime, Nerdboy will just check on the girls. Maybe they're already prepared to leave. But Chinwen is one ungrateful son of a gun. Instead of thanking Luluo for the potatoes, he spat them out as if food wasn't running scarce. He emphasized that this was simply the most disgusting potato he'd ever tasted. Chingjun begged to differ. There were no problems in his potatoes. Maybe the big guy was just having anxiety issues right now. Hearing the word anxiety did not sit well with Chinwen. He admitted that he's worried for everyone's safety. If not for that, would he be anxious? He closed his fist intensely until veins started popping out. They are in an apocalypse that's filled with monsters at every corner, and he just wants to save everyone. With his face gradually turning to that of a disgustingly ugly Darksider, he angrily asked why his group kept on forcing him to take difficult actions. Inside the earthen house, Liu Fengyuan proudly presented the agricultural drone that she had taken from the School of Animal Science at their university. Remember, people, stealing is all good in the apocalypse. The drone also has an infrared ray function. Using it to bring the group back to the civil defense military fortification shouldn't be a problem. They can just take the path away from Darksider activity. She had been rattling on for a while now, but she noticed that Luluo didn't seem so happy with the idea of getting out of the woods. So, she decided to ask her friend what exactly she was worrying about. What in the world could make her so hesitant to get back into civilization? Luluo smiled awkwardly, not knowing exactly how she should answer. Previously, Li Chengyin had only said that he hoped to find out the situation in the outside world. But what should Luluo do in this situation when her friend wants her to join the rescue group back in the city? She feared that if she left without saying goodbye to her savior, Li Chengyin would be angry at her for being so ungrateful. Chungjun and Mr. Buzzkill re-entered the earthen house. Nerdboy asked if Luluo was now mentally prepared to head out. He thought that she was just afraid of running into Darksiders outside. Luluo asserted that that wasn't the case. She considered just telling them the truth about her situation, but she was afraid that Liu Fengyuan and the others would just think that she was crazy. Inside her mind, she was already scrambling frantically. It would be better if Li Chengyin just came out and did something to clear up her current predicament. She just wanted Mr. Landlord to tell her what to do. The irritable Qin Wen finally ran out of patience and said that enough was enough. They had wasted enough time already. If Luluo didn't want to leave, then he would gladly tie her up and bring her along forcefully anyway. If they continued wasting even more valuable time here, they'd just be playing with everyone's safety and lives. In his perspective, Luluo's indecisiveness was indicative of her saying that it didn't matter if the trio lived or died. Liu Fengyuan stood up for her friend, asking the big guy if his dull monkey brain had finally snapped and he had gone mad. Qin Wen didn't even have the patience to convince a friend properly. It was like he wasn't even the Qing Wen that she knew. He didn't have any semblance of basis for his wild conjectures, and he just kept on talking about dying every time he opened his mouth. If he was so afraid of death, then he shouldn't have bothered joining the rescue team. Liu Fengyuan was on a roll. Then she asked Mr. Buzzkill if he saw himself as some kind of savior, that without his brilliance, everyone else would perish. Based on the darkening of his expression, it looked like the e-girl hit the nail right on the head. She took over with the decision-making, urging Chungjun to proceed according to their plan. Miss E-girl would go outside to release the drone while Nerdboy made sure that the surroundings were safe. Her assertiveness just made glasses agree. Liu Fengyuan turned to Qin Wen one last time, urging him to wake the hell up and not let himself become the burden holding back the group in the end. Unbeknownst to everyone, the darkness inside Mr. Buzzkill's system was already itching to come out. Being forced to confront his fears with a reality check just made it worse. The plan proceeded as they had mapped out. Liu Fengyuan set up her drone to scout the nearby areas from the safety of the skies. They chose a decent clearing as a launching point. The wind force was just right so they could set off any second now. Holding the controller and getting ready to wear the mask monitor, the journey back to the settlement looked like it would be a breeze. Liu Fengyuan optimistically hoped for there to be no Darksiders that were blocking their path back home. Finally, they lifted off. The drone swiftly ascended to the skies to document the safest path that the group could possibly take. Things were going so well until they weren't anymore. A freaking hookshot aimed specifically at the drone launched into the air to crush it into a million pieces, raining down debris on the people below. Liu Fengyuan took off the monitor mask that had turned off. No one saw this coming, so Nerdboy and E-girl were thoroughly shocked. Turning to the direction that the hookshot came from, they saw the burly figure of Qin Wen coming out of the earthen house with one of his arms extended like a rope. His hands took the form of the hookshot. He kept on repeating that the Darksiders were responsible for this. The hookshot and the long rope quickly flexed back into its arm-length form. Qin Wen deliriously chanted that he was the only one who could save all of them from the Darksiders. They should listen to his orders if they want to be saved. Luluo was still inside the house, and she was the closest one to the madman. She didn't have a clear view of his face, so she wasn't sure if this guy had turned to the dark side completely. The obscure darkness in his face and the glaring light in his eyes pretty much confirmed it. But the odd thing was, Qin Wen had not stopped proclaiming that he was just protecting the group. In his perspective, they were the ones who did not understand. Realizing that this guy was already a lost cause, Luluo tried to run past him out of the doorway with all the speed that she could muster. Out of desperation and fear, she managed to run away pretty far from the partially transformed Darksider to warn the others that Qin Wen had fallen to depravity. Hookshot Boy still had some brain cells left to feel wronged by the fact that his so-called comrades were not listening to a word that he was saying. Luluo was even running away from him like he was a monster. So, like a sane and normal human, he yelled that everyone would die by his hands as he readied his hookshot arm for another round of launch. Before Qin Wen could extend his rope to blast his hookshot off, the earthen house behind him started cracking by itself, caving in out of nowhere. When it finally collapsed in one fell swoop, the heavy chunks of solid rocks dogpiled on top of the hook-shot Darksider as Luluo continued running, only turning around to see the destruction behind her. Like always, after seeing something bad happen, Luluo's first thought was to blame herself for everything. Chungjun and Liu Fengyuan were also safe as they were far from the collapse. They were both confused as Qinwen had never gotten into direct contact with Darksiders. They did not even consider such a wild variable in their escape plan. Miss E-Girl snapped out of her confusion to grab the gobsmacked Luluo from where she was fearfully standing. She was the only one who kept her wits about her. She knew that a Darksider was not like the zombies from movies. Besides, they had no idea how these monsters mutate. She also urged the nerd to start running unless he thought he could fight against a Darksider. From the collapsed house, the sinister hook shot from before forced its way out of the heavy debris, homing in on the fleeing group. Thankfully, Luluo decided to look back in a panic, urging the target of the hook, Liu Fengyuan, to dodge to the side. Miss E-Girl also turned around to see that the sharp metal tip was about to pierce through her body. But before the hook shot even got remotely close to her, a piece of solid land protruded out of nowhere to stop the seemingly unstoppable momentum of the hook. Instead of skewering the E-Girl's lithe body, it was halted by some earth-bending hocus-pocus. Liu Fengyuan looked at the halted tip of metal glistening with the reflection from the sunlight fearfully. Had the earth not decided to intervene, she would have been done. The hook part of the weapon was lodged too tightly on the rock, but there was some trembling happening at the other side of the rope, the spot where the earthen house had collapsed. Using the flexibility of the elastic rope going back to its original length, Qinwen the Darksider escaped the weight of the debris unscathed. He was still blabbering on about how it was the Darksider's fault that all of this was happening. His other hand balled into a fist as it also started turning into a foreign material, his flesh gaining a different property. Qinwen kept on going on and on about how the group needed him and that they would not survive without his help. An invisible hand stopped his overgrown fist before it reached the other survivors. Based on the sizes alone, it looked like a massive mismatch, but the invisible hand stood steady. Li Chengyin finally decided to show up at the perfect junction. His body was in the position of the earth wall that stopped the hook shot in the first place. This was his first time witnessing the process of a human mutating into a grotesque Darksider. He must admit that this Qinwen fella seemed to be a bit special. Mr. Hookshot. Darksider was still cognizant that someone was stopping his attacks. He could feel it, but he could not see the landlord's form. As far as Qinwen was aware, although the mysterious presence looked like a part of the land, there was a clear consciousness at play. Then why would a non-human stop him? In Qinwen's deluded brain, he was just doing his best to protect the group, so how was he in the wrong? Li Chengyin curiously asked if this was true. If that's the case, then he and Qinwen might have something in common. He wanted to know if the former Mr. Buzzkill could still keep his own identity as a human even after mutation. Qinwen answered that he and the other 3 survivors were fellow students, friends even. Those simple facts would never change. He so desperately wanted to save them, but it was manifesting in a messed up way. He just kept on convincing himself that he could save everyone and that this was the only way to do so. As a mutated creature himself, Li Chengyin's instincts were telling him that the guy was not lying, or at least he thought that what he was saying and doing was the absolute truth. If that was the case, since he was able to get along with Lu Luo, then why couldn't Qinwen? There was a possibility that the answer lay in the eyes. The mark of hatred and darkness was apparent in Qinwen's eyes. The Darksider's other arm finally finished its mutation, taking the form of multiple flexible ropes with a high degree of toughness. They easily tore through Li Chengyin's earthwall body. Those ropes found their way toward the body of poor Chungjun. They did not run when they had the chance to do so. Now the nerd was paying the price. Li Chengyin turned around to see the damage done for not taking the other mutated arm into account with his earth defense. Qinwen's transformation was closing in on 100%. All the human traces on his face were gone and replaced by the monstrous features of a Darksider. He started yapping about how his friends were infected by the dark element and how he must destroy those that were infected to save them once and for all. Nerd guy Chungjun was shocked by the betrayal of his close friend and still couldn't believe that Qinwen had become his killer. The poor guy died like that, killed by his best friend, who had now turned into a monster. In the next instant, Chungjun's breathless body was already falling to the ground. Liu Fengyuan only managed to shout his name in despair, but it was already useless. Chungjun could no longer hear anything in this life. She only had to regret the decision to stop in this cursed place, but nothing could be changed anymore. Now the girls needed to think about themselves and run away as soon as possible, saving their lives. Even though Chungjun was dead, Darksider Qinwen was not going to stop. Everything was not enough for him, and he was not going to let his past friends run away and abandon him. In his altered mind, only he could protect them, and if they didn't want that protection, then they shouldn't live. The girls barely made it to the cliff, but it wasn't enough. The Darksiders' attack caught up with them, and here, and escaping the blow, they jumped into the unknown. The cliff was too high. There were several dozen meters to the ground. Liu Fengyuan in flight already realized that this was the end, and here they would die. She was beginning to blame herself for putting them all in this situation. After all, she was the one who had initiated the expedition to find Luluo. Even though it was very dangerous, and it was unknown how humans mutated into Darksiders. In the end, she came to the conclusion that it was her fault, and it was because of her that her friends died. So resigned to her near death, she closed her eyes and was ready to trust fate. To her surprise, she didn't feel the hard impact on the ground. Instead, she and Luluo hit the slope that had just appeared below them, and rolled down it like a kid's slide. Of course, Liu Fengyuan was too surprised by this turn of events and made the critical mistake of flipping to the other side. Now she was breaking with her face, and already at the bottom, she had to spit out the earth and sand from her mouth. Now her face had the full palette of scratches and bruises. Still, this was many times better than death, and Liu Fengyuan couldn't believe her luck. Looking back, she wondered why the terrain had so suddenly changed right below them. It was still hard for her to understand how she had survived such a fall. Luluo hurriedly hugged her friend and reassuringly asked her if she was all right. However, Liu Fengyuan was not someone who needed to be comforted. The only thing she was interested in right now was what the hell was going on. Luluo was just about to explain to her, even though it would be quite difficult to believe her words. But she was sure that they shouldn't run away from this place. After all, there is our hero Li Chengyin, who will definitely solve all the problems, and he would keep them safe in this world full of dangers. Meanwhile, up above, our hero was just solving the problem with the Darksider. The mutated Qinwen was quite unhappy with the fact that some piece of land was preventing him from being with his friends and made him miss them. He couldn't wait to continue saving them. Darksider was now going to destroy his enemy, who was preventing him from moving on to saving people. Our hero, of course, thought that such logic looked very dubious. How could you even think that killing your friends would save them? Where is there any sanity in that? Li Chengyin was wrong to think that he could negotiate with him, and that's why Chengzhen died. Our hero was too stupid to think that Qinwen could be like himself and could continue to live the life of a reasonable person after mutation. But in the end, Qinwen turned out to be just another ordinary dumb Darksider, without a shadow of human consciousness and only with instincts to kill and meaningless muttering. Such an exceptionally harmful monster could now be disposed of without a trace of regrets. Feeling Li Chengyin prepare for battle and activate his power, the Darksider tensed up and was simply shocked by so many dark elements. He immediately rushed into the attack, intending to save them all, whatever meaning he put into those words. Our hero tried to stop his hook attack with his hand. However, this turned out to be a bad idea. The hook simply destroyed his arm and pierced through his body. Li Chengyin was surprised to see such strength of a Darkseer. Is this monster really that strong? After pondering, our hero decided that it wasn't. It was just that he himself had become too weak. And the reason was very simple. In this mountainous area, the soil was too stony with little ground, and now even though he had moved some of his land here, the amount of ground here was still insufficient, and so the amount of his strength was greatly reduced. While the Darksider was full of strength and energy, he continued his ramblings, sure that only he could save people, and this piece of land was a monster. In a way, our hero even felt sorry for him. Now that he was a common Darksider, he had nowhere to go. Those exposed to the dark sun are tainted by the dark elements, and the only way to save them from suffering is to kill them. After all, once transformed, Darksiders cannot return to normal human society, due to their appearance or aggressive nature and lack of human consciousness. No matter how it sounded, it was only possible for Darksiders to return to the dark side, to similarly mutated beings. That was why Li Chengyin reminded his opponent that he had no place to go and no destination once he went to the dark side. Although our hero was a Darksider himself, he was different from the others because he had kept his mind and consciousness. Now he was determined to show the last mercy to the creature that used to be Qinwen and bury him to end his suffering. Of course the monster was against such an act of mercy and was willing to do anything to suffer a little more in this world. He made his hook rotate, turning it into a kind of blender to smash his opponent into pieces. But Li Chengyin didn't sit idle either and prepared his own trick using fast-growing roots. This time the hook was unable to destroy his hands. Even more so, it couldn't even touch them. The roots stopped him safely. Of course, everything had to be paid for. Now our hero had to use plants that lived in symbiosis with him, and he was sorry for the damage he had caused them. However, the main thing now was to deal with the Darksider, and then he would reward them generously for their help. Now enhancing his ground body with roots, Li Chengyin was able to deprive his opponent of his arm without any problems. The Darksider immediately roared in pain and rage, and stood still for a moment to catch his breath. It seemed that he had given up and was about to start running away, but it only seemed so. Soon the rage and hatred that filled him burst out, and he used his other hand to attack. Suddenly, Lulo could be heard shouting behind him as she climbed to the top of the cliff again despite the danger. She brought with her a backpack with a very useful tool, which she hurriedly threw to our hero, and advised him to use it. Li Chengyin turned around just in time to avoid falling victim to the thing himself, and quickly caught it. It was just what he needed. Large and sharp garden shears. They alone would probably be enough, but our hero thought otherwise. Li Chengyin decided to enhance them with the power of the earth and the flexibility of plants, to combine with the sharpness of metal weapons to create an ultimate weapon. Now he had a power in his hands that the wooden Darksider would definitely not be able to handle no matter how hard he tried, and no matter how much he hated it. Now it was time to put this new weapon to the test. The Darksider wasn't going to give up no matter what and went on the attack. Li Chengyin only smiled contentedly at this. This idiot didn't even realize that he had already lost. With one confident move, he destroyed the Darksider's second arm, and only pieces of wood were scattered in different directions. Our hero didn't stop there and went on the attack himself. Now that his opponent didn't have a single hand, he had no problem giving him a crushing blow to the head. Darksider fell helplessly to the ground, his mask of darkness cracked, and due to his lack of arms, he could no longer get up. Neither would Li Chengyin let him. He towered right above the monster, putting a tip to its throat. The dark side had been defeated. Toot Toot immediately appeared from the ground as soon as the danger had passed. He criticized our boy's weapon, calling it insufficiently durable, though quite tough. But among his incisive remarks was the helpful advice to bury the Darksider in the ground to absorb nutrients from it, according to the standard rule of nature. Of course, the Darksider didn't like that prospect very much, and in desperation shouted another load of nonsense. Before burying him underground, Li Chengyin had one last question for him. Why did he become like this? He just shouted once again that he wanted to save people. This made our hero think that perhaps Qinwen became a Darksider, not only because of his exposure to the dark sun. It was because of his constant paranoia that drew him to the dark side. The ground and roots under Li Chengyin began to absorb the monster. The earth would take care of him and become a safe place that would ensure that no one else would be killed by a so-called savior of friends like this one. When everyone finally calmed down and came to their senses, only 2 small mounds of earth remained near the cliff, with Liu Fengyuan looking sadly at them. She wasn't crying, but she was barely holding on. They were her best friends and had died in one fell swoop. Now she only had Luluo left. For her sake, she must be strong. Lulo, seeing her depressed state, wanted to comfort her and distract her from her loss by introducing her to Li Chengyin. But there was one small thing about it, which our hero hurriedly reminded her of. His body was difficult to see, but he had a solution to this problem. All that was left was to find out if Liu Fengyuan could hear him. He himself wanted to ask her if she was offended by him. Li Chengyin himself was well aware that he had screwed up. If not for his indecision, Cheng-jun would still be alive, and Qinwen would have been neutralized faster. If our hero hadn't raised false hopes about Darksiders, he could have handled this situation much better. Surprisingly, Liu Fengyuan replied to him that she didn't think so and didn't blame him for anything. He must be an idiot to come up with something like that. In fact, when she came out of the civilian shelter, she was mentally prepared for such an outcome. Even if the worst thing happened to her, she wouldn't blame anyone else but herself. However, Luluo was not surprised by her words, but by the fact that she could hear Li Chengyin's words. Therefore, she asked how she could do it. She didn't know the answer to this question, but for some reason, after Cheng-jun's funeral, she clearly began to feel the presence of another person nearby, even though she couldn't see him. Now, thanks to the image made from the ground, there was some sort of speaking object in front of her. It was more like an abandoned clay doll that had been broken many times and covered in mud. That's roughly what our hero looked like from her perspective. Luluo also revealed an interesting fact about Li Chengyin, that he himself is a sentient Darksider who turned into a piece of land, and he has a friend, a friendly plant Darksider called Toot Toot. Their existence was hard to believe, and other survivors would definitely laugh upon hearing something like this. But now the two of them had seen them with their own eyes and simply couldn't doubt it. Liu Fengyuan was still very sad, and even such an unusual company of 2 intelligent Darksiders couldn't distract her. Luluo offered her to stay with them and live here, but she was in no hurry to agree. She needed to think and rest, and she was going to announce her decision to them tomorrow. Liu Fengyuan was very tired and asked them to let her stay at their house for one night. As expected, Liu Fengyuan was too shocked by the death of her friends, and Luluo was worried about her. She was sure that she should spend time with her this evening to calm her down. Well, our hero didn't mind the additional company. It's more fun together. The evening passed quickly, and the girls, exhausted from a stressful day, quickly fell asleep. However, something was wrong, and Luluo was shivering. She was sick and had a fever. Outside, our hero, free from the need for sleep, was looking up at the sky and pondering the future. Near him was Toot Toot, who was wondering whether the number of human members had increased permanently or only temporarily. Li Chengyin did not know for sure. Since the dark sun had set, communication had been cut off, and the scouting drone had been destroyed. In such a situation, if Liu Fengyuan is as smart as she says, then she won't leave and go on a risky journey alone. Toot Toot had a poor understanding of human behavior, therefore asked if she knows a place safer to live, so why then did she come here? To him, such actions seemed very unreasonable. The answer was simple: to save her friend. It was proof that she was a very good person, and Li Chengyin wanted to shelter only good people in his land. For Toot Toot, such an explanation did not clarify anything, and he despaired to understand their actions, said that the thoughts, words, and actions of animals are very difficult to understand, unlike plants. The morning of the next day was by no means calm and serene. It began with the screams of Liu Fengyuan, who was asking Lu Luo what had happened to her. Li Chengyin came running to her screams to find out what was going on, but Liu Fengyuan could not explain anything to him. Lu Luo had a high fever, but its cause was unknown. It could have been anything: an allergy to an insect bite, a parasitic infection, or even sepsis. Lu Luo herself thought it was because she was too tired and her immune system had deteriorated. On top of that, she had been desperately fighting for her life for the past few days and her spirit was too tense. She was sure that she just needed to get some sleep, and everything would pass. Liu Fengyuan was not going to let things go. She was very worried about her friend and was willing to do her best to help her get better. Judging from the symptoms, Lu Luo needed antibiotics, but unfortunately they didn't have any. To get them, they would have to go back to the civilian shelter and get them there. That place was not far away. It would take less than a day to get there and back, and Liu Fengyuan was willing to immediately set off on this dangerous journey. But in the meantime, Lu Luo needed to be closely watched and taken care of. She assigned these duties to our hero. When she was about to leave their home, Li Chengyin stopped her. He reminded her that she would not be able to get out of this wilderness safely on her own without the help of a scout drone. If he could go with her, he would definitely protect her. But unfortunately, his range of motion is limited to this piece of land, and when he moves outside of it, it will be too slow. Lu Luo would simply not be able to last that long. The difficulties and dangers along the way didn't stop Liu Fengyuan. She was willing to take the risk and go on her own. She didn't see the point of living in a world without her friends. That's why she was willing to put absolutely everything on the line to save Lu Luo. Seeing her determination, our hero decided not to stand aside and help. The very next moment, he tore off his eye. Such a sudden act shocked Liu Fengyuan because she had no idea why he did it. But to be honest, Li Chengyin wasn't even sure what he was doing yet. All he wanted to do was to test his hunches. With all his might, he cast his eye into the sky. Since he didn't know much about his new body, he had to check everything on his own. Strangely enough, his theory was confirmed. The piece of earth separated from his body could indeed continue to have a part of his perception, but it could only last for a short time. Just a few seconds later, his eye had turned into a piece of earth that no longer had anything to do with him. But Toot Toot knew how even this limitation could be overcome. He only needed to infuse the piece of earth with dark energy. Toot Toot himself moved like an animal on the same principle and could separate from the ground by expending dark elements. In this case, our hero wondered how many dark elements it would take to separate a piece of earth from itself for 24 hours and still maintain the same perception during that time. Surely not a small amount. Toot Toot tried to calculate roughly and even, froze in place when he realized how much it would take. But when he looked at the house where Lu Luo was lying sick, suffering in a fever, Toot Toot dared and asked if one day he would also fall ill. Would they also be willing to spend resources to save him? Li Chengyin assured him that, of course, he would do his best. It would be natural, after all. They are now a symbiotic group together and should take care of each other. Gradually, Toot Toot realized everything and began to accumulate dark elements. His roots had broken free and he was now ready to help his friends. He climbed higher specifically to gather more energy and transmit it. Liu Fengyuan was shocked at such a quick transformation. Before this little flower seemed quite harmless to her. Toot Toot wasted no time and began to fill our hero's land with dark energy that he himself absorbed from the sun and earth. This amount should have been enough for Li Chengyin to be able to separate a piece of earth from his main body and still retain his perception for a full 24 hours. The sound of energy filling his body was similar to the beeping sound of resource production in some game. Li Chengyin was surprised that Toot Toot knew so much, and wondered what other purposes dark energy could be used for. Was Toot Toot really using it to become smarter? But really he was just learning by watching our hero. And now by example, he realized what the concept of groups and friends meant to people. Now he was hurrying Li Chengyin to set off faster without wasting precious time. Toot Toot had invested a lot of energy and didn't want it to go to waste. They had to act quickly, but who knows what obstacles and dangers await them on the way.